The first time Jace stepped onto Varin 7, he knew his life would never be the same. The air was thicker here, sweet with the scent of burning crystals and strange pollen. The skies above shimmered with deep purples and streaks of silver. It felt like standing inside a dream, but Jace was not here to dream. He was here to work. A human engineer chosen not for his charm or political skill, but for his steady hands and clear mind. He had come to help build bridges, literal and diplomatic, between Earth and the Valian Empire. Security concerns were high. Humans were still new to this world, still met with wary eyes and stiff silences. The Valian leaders didn't trust easy, and Jace's presence was seen as both a gesture of goodwill and a dangerous experiment. So they placed him in the one location they believed would be most guarded inside, the royal palace. He had expected stone walls and guards with plasma weapons. What he found instead was a palace of towering glass spires that hummed in the wind, and long hallways that glowed with soft light beneath his feet. The walls breathed with living vines that curled in patterns, and the air always carried a hum like a low song just beneath hearing. It was beautiful, but lonely. He wasn't alone for long. He met the three princesses during a formal dinner that was anything but warm. Lyra, the eldest, with her green-scaled skin and golden eyes, sat with her back straight, her voice firm and clipped. Nera, her sister, had deep violet skin marked with glowing freckles that pulsed like stars. She watched Jace like he was a puzzle she wasn't sure she wanted to solve. And then there was Mira, the youngest. Pale blue, with eyes too large for her delicate face and ears that fluttered when she was nervous. She didn't speak much that night, but she looked at Jace like she'd been waiting to meet him her whole life. In the palace, traditions were strange and endless. One of them involved sacred rest chambers, quiet meditation spaces where the royal family slept during planetary shifts. Jace had been told to avoid them, but no one told him that one of the repair conduits for the palace's energy grid ran right through one of those chambers. Late one night, half asleep and holding his toolkit, Jace entered the chamber to fix a humming panel. He froze when he saw them. All three princesses were there, asleep in a nest of glowing pillows, the room dim and warm. He backed out immediately, heart pounding, but not before Mira stirred and opened her eyes. She didn't scream. She smiled out the next morning. He was summoned, not by the king, but by a dozen pairs of eyes whispering behind silken curtains. No one accused him directly, but the palace had its own way of speaking, with glances, with tension in the air. A servant dropped his cup and never apologized. A guard watched him too long. Rumors were alive. Later, Mira found him standing near the moon fountain, silent and tense. She came close, her hands tucked in the sleeves of her robe. "You didn't stare," she said. "You didn't laugh. You just looked. And then left," Jace swallowed. "I didn't know it was your chamber. I was just trying to fix the conduit." She nodded slowly. Her ears twitched. "I don't feel ugly when you look at me." Jace blinked. "You're not ugly, Mira." Her smile trembled, then held steady. "Most humans think we are." He didn't reply. Instead, he sat beside her on the edge of the fountain. They watched the water shimmer in silence. The palace still whispered, but something had shifted. The days that followed felt like walking through a storm in silence. Jace could feel it, how the air in the palace changed, how conversation stopped when he entered a room, how the guards at the eastern gates now held their stares longer. Even the palace walls seemed to echo differently when he walked them. The rumor had taken root, like a vine twisting through every hall, and it was growing. He kept to his work. He adjusted heat regulators, tuned energy cores, and rechecked the atmospheric filters in the meditation gardens. He told himself that staying busy was the best way to avoid attention. But there were always eyes now, watching, judging, some with curiosity, others with quiet disdain, but not the princesses. In fact, it was Mira who found him again, this time in the greenhouse atrium where the air buzzed with soft lights and humming pollen drones. She brought him tea in a carved stone cup, her small hands trembling as she held it out. Jace took it carefully, his eyes searching hers. "You don't have to," he said. "I know," she whispered, "but I want to." They sat among the tall, breathing plants, and for the first time she told him stories. Stories about her childhood, how other Vlian children had teased her for her oversized ears and delicate voice, how she'd once tried to dye her skin darker to look more like her older sisters, how her mother had scolded her not for doing it, but for believing she wasn't enough. Jace listened, quiet and still. He didn't interrupt. He didn't flinch when she spoke of her insecurities. And when she finally fell silent, he said just, "One thing, you're more than enough, Mira. More than they deserve." That night, something changed again. Not in public, but in the spaces between glances, in the subtle ways the princesses stood beside him. Lyra passed him in the training corridor where she was sparring with 2 palace guards. Without looking at him, she said, "Next time I want you to watch. You could learn something." Nera, who had barely spoken to him before, appeared at his workstation in the tech wing. She stood behind him as he adjusted the pressure on a coolant valve. "You used the wrong crystal compound," she said, her tone blunt. "But your solution WASN single quotes T ... tupid. Try this one instead." She handed him a cube the color of bloodstone. By the time the week ended, the tension in the palace didn't go away, it deepened. One evening, long past dusk, Jace was summoned to the observation tower. It was a place he'd only seen from a pizza distance, perched above the rest of the palace like a silent eye. When he arrived, he found the 3 princesses waiting. No guards, no attendants. Just them, standing in the starlight. Lyra stepped forward first. "We asked for you." Jace looked between them. "Why?" Nera crossed her arms, her bioluminescent freckles dimmed to a soft glow. "Because people think they already know what's happening. Might as well give them something to really talk about." Jace's breath caught. "What do you mean?" Mira walked up to him, close enough that he could feel her warmth. "We want to share the rest chamber again. But not because of scandal, not because of duty." "Then why?" he asked. Lyra answered this time. "Because we trust you." The words hung there, heavier than anything he had expected. They led him back through hidden corridors, up spiraling stairs carved into translucent stone. The sacred rest chamber was different now, glowing with quiet light. The air was warmer, the silence deeper. The space wasn't just sacred, it was intimate. They lay together, not touching, not speaking, just breathing in the same quiet. Jace stared at the ceiling, unsure if he was dreaming. He had shared nothing physical, yet everything emotional. And that was the part that scared him more than anything, because it was real. By morning, a servant had seen him again, exiting the Princess Chamber. This time, the rumor didn't whisper. It roared. He returned to his quarters to find the palace guards waiting. Not with weapons, but with silence. They handed him a scroll sealed with the king's mark. Inside, it said just one thing. "You are requested for private audience, immediately." Jace's heart pounded, not with fear, not with guilt, but with something worse. Uncertainty. The king's private audience chamber was nothing like the rest of the palace. Where most rooms glowed softly and pulsed with light from living stone, this room was dark, dimly lit by tall braziers burning with green fire. Jace stood in the center, alone. The walls were lined with carvings of old Vlian rulers, their faces stern, their eyes wide and eternal. He could hear his own heartbeat, loud, uneven, uncertain. Then a heavy door creaked open behind him. The king entered, tall and broad, wearing layered robes that shimmered like liquid metal. Guards flanked him, silent and still, their expressions unreadable. But it was the way the king looked at Jace that made the air feel colder. Not angry, not curious, just measured. You shared the sacred chamber, the king said slowly. His voice like stone grinding against stone. Jace opened his mouth, then closed it. There were no words that would make it better. No way to explain a silence that meant more than touch. He bowed his head slightly. I didn't intend. Intention, the king interrupted, does not matter to the court, nor to the people. A pause. Then the king did something unexpected. He sat. Sit with me, human. Jace hesitated, then obeyed, taking the lower seat offered to him. The stone was cool beneath him. Do you know what you've done? The king asked. I didn't break the law. I followed their lead, Jace said, careful but firm. The king studied him. No, you didn't break the law. You broke something deeper. You disrupted balance. The people are speaking. The nobles are furious. The high priestess has sent a message demanding punishment. And yet, he leaned forward slightly, my daughters defend you. Jace's breath caught. They came to me this morning, the king continued. They said you were not to be harmed. They said you've done nothing wrong. And one of them, his eyes narrowed, said you make her feel safe. Meera. Of course it was Meera. Double quote. So now, the king said, standing slowly, I must decide. Do I protect tradition? Or do I protect what is growing in my own house? The silence stretched long. Then he waved a hand. A guard stepped forward and handed Jace a ceremonial sash, black and silver, the mark of observed union. It was not a marriage, but a declaration, one that told the world the royal daughters had chosen a human for sacred proximity. It was political dynamite. You are not dismissed, the king said. You are elevated, under watch. Jace left the chamber feeling the weight of that sash like iron on his chest. As he walked through the palace halls, he saw the change immediately. Servants avoided his gaze. Nobles scowled openly. A group of priests stood in a corner whispering, their eyes burning holes into his back. That night, the city burned with gossip. And not just gossip - protest. Outside the palace walls, a crowd had gathered. Some shouted for tradition. Others demanded Jace be sent back to Earth. Someone tossed a broken crystal against the palace gates. It shattered like lightning. Inside, Jace found himself drawn to the observation deck again, and there they were. Lyra, Nera, and Meera - waiting. He approached slowly. Your father made his decision, he said. Lyra nodded. We knew he would. Nera stepped forward. But the people won't follow so easily. Mira's voice was barely above a whisper. Some want to hurt you. Jace turned to her. Do you regret it? She shook her head. No, because I don't feel ugly anymore. Because when we're together, I feel like I belong somewhere. Nera touched his arm lightly. Then you must stay close. The palace is no longer safe in its quiet corners. Lyra looked over the railing at the crowd below. Let them talk. Let them rage. The truth is already rooted. What truth? Jace asked. Lyra turned to him, eyes glowing under the moons. That you belong to us, and we to you. Suddenly, a loud crack split the air. A section of the palace's outer wall flared red. An explosion. Alarm bells screamed. Lights flashed. Jace grabbed Mira's hand as guards rushed in. Lyra pulled Nera behind a shielded column to the central chamber. A soldier barked. We're under attack. Jace didn't think he moved with them, running down glowing hallways now flickering in emergency mode. Sounds of chaos echoed from the lower levels. Someone had breached the outer gate. Someone had come to tear apart what had begun. As they reached the chamber, Jace looked at the princesses, breathless, heart hammering. They weren't just strange, alien royalty anymore. They were his, and someone wanted to end it all before it could begin. The chamber doors slammed shut behind them with a deep, vibrating thud. Inside, red lights pulsed across the ceiling like a heartbeat. The king's personal war room, once silent and ceremonial, was now alive with tension. Holographic maps of the palace flickered above the central table, marking breaches in glowing orange arcs. Outside, the noise of the city had turned from angry shouting to outright chaos. Smoke curled into the sky like black veins. The protest had become something else. This was no accident. This was war. Rebels, one guard growled. They've waited for this moment. They timed it perfectly, Nera said, fingers tapping rapidly against the interface. Her glowing freckles pulsed with data as she scanned the siege. They're inside the western gate, 3 corridors from the royal vaults. Jace stood beside her, watching the palace blueprints shift and flicker. He recognized some of the route's maintenance shafts, power lines, auxiliary doors he'd inspected weeks earlier. But now those paths were twisted with danger. Lyra paced back and forth, her armored boots ringing against the crystal floor. She wore a chest plate now, deep green like her scales, etched with the symbol of the royal house. This isn't just about us, she said. They're trying to break the throne, take the capital, turn the people against our father. Who would dare such a thing? Mira whispered, her voice barely holding together. Her ears trembled. Corin, Lyra spat. He's waited for a reason, and now he has won the scandal, the rumors. He's using it. Jace clenched his fists. Because of me. No, Nera said sharply. Because of fear. And you're just the excuse. A deep hum rattled the walls. The outer defense cannons fired from the palace spires, followed by the tremor of an impact. The ground shook. Dust fell from the ceiling. The king entered, flanked by 6 guards. His robes had been replaced by battle armor, dark silver and ancient in design. His face held no expression. Just wait, my daughters, he said. You know what this is. They nodded. You, he said to Jace, were never meant to hold a blade, but you will. Because you are one of us now, not by blood, but by bond. He tossed a weapon toward him, slender, glowing at the hilt. A blade, but humming with engineering tech Jace barely understood. Still, his hand closed around it. They are coming for this chamber, the king said, for all of us. You must protect each other. Before Jace could reply, the chamber walls cracked with a deafening boom. A breach. Positions. Lyra roared, already drawing her weapon. The lights went black. For a breath, nothing. Then the doors burst open. They came like shadows, figures in stolen armor, faces hidden, moving with precision. Palace rebels, but trained. They weren't shouting. They were silent. Deadly. Lyra moved first, striking with the discipline of a warrior born. Her blade sang through the air, clashing with steel and sparks. Nera unleashed bursts of energy from her gloves, her tech weaving barriers and disarming foes. Mira stayed behind cover, guiding wounded guards to safety, wrapping energy cloth around their limbs, murmuring words of calm. Jace fought with instincts, not skill. He ducked, blocked, shoved. His blade hummed and shook in his hand, nearly slipping. More than once. But he didn't run. He stayed beside them. One time, a rebel lunged straight at him. Blade raised high until Lyra's sword cut the man down from the side, her eyes blazing. Stay behind me, human, she said through clenched teeth. Not a chance. Jace gasped out, then suddenly, silence. Last of the intruders fell. The floor was slick with heat and damage. Smoke curled upward. A single horn echoed in the distance, the signal for retreat. They had survived the first wave. The king stood tall again, though blood streaked his cheek. This was a warning, he said. Corin will try again. Nera slammed her palm on the map console. We have to strike before he regroups. No, the king said. We finish what has begun. We show the people the truth. He turned to Jace. The wedding ceremony will not wait, not another day. Tomorrow, at first light, you will stand with them, before the world. And the union will be sealed. Jace felt the ground shift beneath him, not from the aftershocks of battle, but from the weight of what he was becoming. Lyra single quotes, S voice cut through. They will come again, Nera nodded. They will. Mira stepped forward, taking Jace's hand. Her eyes were wide, but steady. But next time, we'll be ready. Jace looked at them all three. Scarred, bruised, determined. He tightened his grip on the blade. Then let them come. The sky over Varin 7 was still dark when the first bells rang across the capital. They weren't alarms this time. They were ceremonial, solemn, slow. They echoed through the towers, through the hollow bones of the palace, through the broken hearts of a shaken city. And as they tolled, a new sound joined them. Drums, steady, rising, announcing the beginning of something the world had never seen. The wedding of a human, and 3 alien princesses. But beneath the formal tones, a storm was building. Jace stood in the preparation hall, his hands trembling as a palisade fastened his ceremonial sash across his chest. It shimmered with silver threads and the royal crest, 3 interlocked stars, one for each princess. His fingers brushed over the fabric as if to convince himself it was real. Outside, he could hear voices gathering. Thousands, not all in celebration. The day before had left the palace bruised. Parts of the outer wall were still scorched from Corin's failed assault. Bodies had been buried. Guards stood twice as thick at every entrance. And somewhere, in the shadows beyond the city, Corin was still alive, planning. You're sweating, Nera said from the archway, her voice dry but gentle. Jace turned. She wore a deep purple ceremonial robe woven with circuits and gemstones that pulsed faintly in time with her heart. Her eyes, always watching, softened when they met his. I thought I was supposed to look regal, he said, forcing a half smile. You look like someone about to jump from orbit without a tether, she replied, stepping closer. Mera appeared. Next, her pale blue dress flowing like mist behind her. Her ears twitched, and she held a small carved box in her hands. For you, she said softly, a token from our people. Inside was a stone pendant, rough and unpolished. It's not much, she added, but it's from the oldest mountain on Varin 7. It means chosen without force. Jace swallowed. Hard. Thank you. Then came Lyra. She strode in wearing armor. Not a dress, not robes. Armor, green and black, etched with ancient marks. The only concession to the ceremony was a single flower, a crimson vine coiled through her left horn. No one said I had to look delicate. She growled when Jace stared. He smiled wider now. You look exactly right. But even as they laughed, even as their hands touched, the tension crackled around them like storm fire. They were being watched, judged, not just by nobles or priests, but by history itself. They walked together to the high altar, a wide platform suspended above the crowd by invisible lifts. Light poured over them from the twin suns and the city. Below was a sea of mixed faces, some hopeful, some hateful, some simply stunned. The king stood at the center of the platform, his battle wounds now cleaned, his robes heavy with power. When Jace approached, the king looked at him with something close to respect. Today, you become not just consort, he said. You become symbol. Jace turned to the people. And just as he was about to speak, the sky exploded, a deep boom. Too low for thunder. Then another. And another. Black smoke rose from the eastern spires. 3 of them at once. Panic rippled through the crowd. From the palace steps, a messenger ran up, bleeding from the arm. They've hit the towers. Corin's men are moving again. There. Coming for the platform. Guards rushed forward. The royal altar guards formed a circle around the king and his daughters. Jace stood between them, heart racing. Lyra drew her blade without hesitation. Again? He dares interrupt our vow? He wants to shatter it before it begins, Nera said, scanning for weak points in the defense field. Then we finish this. Mira whispered, her voice shaking but firm. A shadow moved across the platform. One of the lifts beneath was failing. From below, rebel soldiers climbed rapidly. Protect the king. A general shouted. But Jace didn't hesitate. He grabbed the fallen banner pole and swung it, knocking a rebel off the edge. He pulled Nera to safety as a bolt of energy scorched the stone near her feet. The battle was chaos. But something was different now. This time, the people didn't run. They fought. Citizens formed barriers around the altar. Human and Valian guards stood side by side. The crowd surged forward, not in panic, but in protection. And as the platform tilted under the assault, Jace turned to the king. Say the words now, he begged. We have to finish it. The king raised his hand, bleeding but unbroken. By ancient right and by new truth, this bond is made. And in the same breath, Lyra, Nera, and Mira joined their hands with Jace's light erupted from the altar, pure, blinding. The energy field expanded, knocking the rebels backward in a shockwave of power none could have predicted. When it cleared, the rebels were gone, and Jace stood, bonded by vow and light, with the 3 alien princesses. The crowd was silent. Then someone began to clap. Then another. Then thousands. For the first time in centuries. Varin 7 united not under war but under love. And far below, in the ruins of the eastern spires, Corin watched from the shadows. He had failed, but his war was not over. The aftermath of the wedding was not peace. For 3 days. The fires across Varin 7 smoldered beneath layers of ash and silence. The city was still standing, but the wounds were fresh, walls cracked, spires blackened, bodies buried beneath twisted metal. And even though the altar had held, even though the bond was sealed before the people's eyes, no one felt safe. Not yet. Jace walked the palace corridors in silence, now dressed not in ceremonial silk, but in reinforced fabric woven with kinetic thread. The pendant from Mira still hung around his neck, rough, heavy, honest. Everywhere he went, guards saluted or bowed, not because they revered him, but because they didn't know what else to do. To them, he was no longer just the human engineer. He was the human who married the crown, but with the crown came enemies. Corin won't hide for long, Lyra said, her voice low and sharp as she stood beside Jace in the war chamber. The firelight caught her eyes, and they burned with fury. He's planning something worse. He has to. His pride won't let him stay in the shadows. Nera stood across the room, eyes locked on a shifting hologram of the outer territories. He's building support again. In secret, isolated noble houses, border clans, some even off-world. We intercepted a message this morning. He calls himself the Rightful Flame. What does that even mean? Jace asked. It means he thinks the throne is still his to take, Nera replied grimly. Mira entered then, her presence like a soft wind brushing across cracked stone. But this time, her eyes held none of their usual kindness. Her robes were torn at the edges. She'd just come from the outer wards, healing the wounded, comforting children whose parents had vanished in the fighting. She looked tired. No, she looked haunted. We don't have much time, she said. He's not just planning a coup. He's planning a purification. Jace turned to her sharply. What? He wants to erase the bond, she said. Not just break it, erase it. As if it never happened. He's targeting the archives, the song chambers, the memory crystals. Everything that proves we stood together at the altar. A silence fell over the room. It was worse than they thought. He didn't just want power, he wanted the story itself to disappear. ERRA tapped the map. If he reaches the central song chamber in Eslan Valley, he can destroy the primary root crystal. If that falls, no one will remember the bonding. The energy signature would vanish from the record. No royal mark, no binding light, just a rumor. Lyra stepped forward. Then we strike first. We? Jace said, surprised. Yes, she said. All four of us, together, like before, like always. He looked at them, their eyes, their posture, their pain. They weren't just leaders now. They were something more. And so was he. The journey to Eslan Valley was not quiet. The royal skimmer cut through the skies at dawn, flying low over the glass rivers and jagged stone fields of Varin 7. They flew without escorts. Corrin had spies everywhere. This mission had to remain hidden even from their own ranks. They landed under cloak near the edge of the valley. Tall violet trees shimmered with dew. Crystals hummed faintly beneath the soil. The song chamber itself sat buried beneath an ancient hill. Hidden by vines and illusion, Nera led the way, using her tech to part the locks. Jace stayed close behind, scanning their path for traps. Lyra never let go of her blade. Mira moved between them all, whispering steady words of protection in the old tongue. They entered the chamber in silence. It was beautiful. Walls carved with the stories of Varin 7, glowing lines that danced when touched. In the center, the root crystal pulsed like a living heart. And then they heard it. Footsteps. Not many but trained. A dozen rebels emerged from the far corridor, Corrin at the front. He was older than Jace remembered, his skin lined with tension, his eyes sharp with rage. You should never have been allowed to breathe our air, Corrin said, staring at Jace. You're not one of us. You are the rot beneath our roots. Then, why are we still standing? Jace asked, stepping forward. Because I haven't pulled the root yet. Corrin hissed. And then the fight began. Lyra moved first, clashing blades with the twin spear rebel, sparks flying as steel met steel. Nera ducked low, tossing an energy orb that shattered the back wall, forcing their attackers into a bottleneck. Mira pulled Jace behind a crystal pillar, then pushed her hands against the ground, activating the chamber's own defenses, sacred glyphs rising from the floor like shields. Jace fought too, not with brute strength, but with precision. He jammed the chamber's access panel, locking out Corrin's override codes. He used a tool from his belt to detonate the ceiling above one of the corridors, blocking reinforcements. They were outnumbered, but not outmatched, and then Corrin charged. At Jace directly, they grappled, fists crashing, slipping on the glassy floor. Corrin slammed Jace against the root crystal, trying to drive a blade into his side. You don't belong here, he snarled. You're not even beautiful. You're nothing. Jace growled through gritted teeth. Neither are they. And they're everything. With a twist, he disarmed Corrin, then drove the man backward, knocking him unconscious against the altar stone. When the rebels surrendered, the root crystal began to glow brighter. They had protected the memory. They had protected the truth. As they stood together, breathless, bruised, but unbroken, the crystal sent out a pulse, a living light that soared into the sky like a beacon. All across Varin 7, people looked up. And remembered. Ending line. The beacon from the root crystal didn't just light the sky. It shook the foundations of Varin 7. Across cities, villages, and floating sanctuaries, Valian elders paused mid-prayer. Children pointed skyward in awe, and warlords in hidden chambers stared in stunned silence. The signal had not been sent in generations, not since the ancient unification wars. And now, that same signal declared one message to the world: the bond is real. The story is sealed, and the future has changed. Inside the song chamber, Jace stood with blood on his lip and fire in his chest. Around him, the air still shimmered from the crystal's pulse. Lyra wiped her blade and sheathed it slowly. Nera's breathing steadied as she rebooted her data implants. Mira knelt over one of the unconscious rebels, placing a glowing stone near his heart to stabilize him. Even now, she chose healing over revenge. "He's not dead," Jace said, glancing down at Corin, who lay bound and unconscious beside the crystal altar. Lyra spat on the floor. "Pity? No," Nera replied. "Not a pity, a message." "We won't build a new world on corpses," Mira said quietly. "We'll build it on choices." Jace looked at them, his wives, his warriors, his soulmates, and felt something ancient move inside him. It wasn't pride. It wasn't power. It was purpose. They returned to the capital with no parade, no music, and no announcements. They didn't need them. The skies had already told the story. And the people were waiting when their royal skimmer touched down near the palace. The crowd that greeted them was quiet at first. Not fearful, not angry, just quiet. Then an elder woman stepped forward, skin faded with age, eyes bright with tears. She bowed, not just to the princesses, but to Jace. After her, a group of scholars followed, their robes inked with the language of the old songs. Then healers, warriors, miners, farmers. Not all bowed, but none turned away. The change had begun. Inside the palace, the king stood waiting, his arm in a sling, his eyes tired but proud. He said nothing at first, only looked at his daughters and at the man beside them. Then he nodded. "The empire is yours now," he said. "Lead it with truth." "What about you?" Lyra asked, startled. The king turned and walked away. "I've done enough damage. And enough good. Now it's your turn." And just like that, the old world stepped aside. In the days that followed, Jace and the princesses began the hard work of rebuilding. They opened the palace walls to human engineers and Valian scientists alike. They created new schools that taught both languages. Nera built a council chamber where disagreements were not silenced, but studied. Mira expanded the healer's quarter, bringing care to every village across the outer rings. And Lyra disbanded the royal military hierarchy and replaced it with community-led guardians who answered to the people first. Jace didn't become a king, refused the crown, but he became something more powerful. A bridge. When he walked the streets, now people no longer whispered the human. They whispered the bond. The symbol of their marriage, 3 interlocked stars over a 4th human spiral, was etched into doors, drawn into sand by children, painted across skimmer sails and resistance flags alike. It didn't belong to the palace anymore. It belonged to the people. But even peace carries a shadow. One evening, as dusk painted the sky in shades of fire, a messenger arrived at the palace gates, trembling, out of breath. He carried a simple message crystal sealed with a foreign mark. Jace took it, turned it over, and activated the message. A voice spoke low, alien, crackling with static. "We saw your light. We remember your bloodline. We are coming to test your truth." The transmission ended. Silence fell over the hall. Lyra clenched her fists. Who was that? Nera scanned the crystal. Coordinates. They're from outside this system. Mira looked at Jace. "What do we do?" Jace stepped forward and placed the crystal beside the pendant on his neck. We stand together. As always, Dot, and somewhere beyond the stars, unseen eyes turned toward Varin 7, where once there was division, now there was unity. Where once there was silence, now there was Story. A human, 3 alien princesses, and a love that rewrote a galaxy's future.